MAGA influencers are increasingly turning on Trump.
I think we have an absolute right to demand sensible answers. And the first question is, who the hell was Jeffrey Epstein working for?
It's all been a big hoax. It's perpetrated by the Democrats. And some stupid Republicans and foolish Republicans fall into the net. And so they try and do the Democrats' work.
Well, it's a very simple question, really. Is President Donald Trump covering up the Jeffrey Epstein story or not? It's one of the very few issues that has the potential to break his relationship with his supporters. Coming up on the program, Trump orders the release of more Epstein evidence. Will that be enough to satisfy his supporters?
If it was an intelligence operations, we would never get the final answer on this information because it probably would have been scrubbed before investigators ever got there.
Plus, is Epstein's former partner, Ghislaine Maxwell, about to reveal the client list?
Maxwell's attorney says that Ghislaine Maxwell will tell the truth.
And is FBI Director KASH Patel holding back? We'll hear from an old friend.
I know him. I believe him to be an honorable man. And so he's now got to deal with the fallout of this.
But first, here's how the U.S. media's been covering the story.
Breaking news overnight about the Jeffrey Epstein files and the conspiracy theories officially being rejected.
Axios obtained a memo from the DOJ that concludes Epstein did not have a client list and that he died by suicide.
You said Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide. People don't believe it.
As someone who has worked as a public defender, as a prosecutor, you know a suicide when you see one, and that's what that was.
He killed himself.
Well, what a relief. The Department of Justice and the FBI have concluded that Jeffrey Epstein was acting alone that whole time. He didn't have a client list, and it turns out that there was nothing suspicious about his death after all.
What do you tell MAGA supporters who say they want anyone involved in Jeffrey Epstein's alleged crimes to be held accountable?
President Trump is facing a brewing revolt from his MAGA base after his Justice Department shot down conspiracy theories tied to convicted sex offender, the late Jeffrey Epstein. Theories which the president and multiple top DOJ officials had previously amplified.
What Donald Trump is learning is when you start the fire, sometimes you can't put it out. Now, he started this Epstein fire.
Trump and his friends campaigned and said, when we are elected, we're going to open up all of the files and you're going to see all these terrible things.
How is it that my father can be convicted of 34 crimes, but no one on Epstein's list has even been brought to light?
We need to release the Epstein list.
I don't care about the list itself, but if release the names, right? What the hell are the House Republicans doing? They have the majority. You can't get the list?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. There are well over, this will make you sick, 200 victims.
And then a few months later, Pam Bondi says there is no list.
The current DOJ under Pam Bondi is covering up crimes.
I did an interview on Fox, and it's been getting a lot of attention because I said, I was asked a question about the client list, and my response was, it's sitting on my desk to be reviewed, meaning the file, along with the JFK, MLK files as well. That's what I meant by that.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. Are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable.
Why do you think your supporters in particular have been so interested in the Epstein story and so upset about how it's been handled? Why do you think that is?
I don't understand why the Jeffrey Epstein case would be of interest to anybody. It's pretty boring stuff. Only pretty bad people, including fake news, want to keep something like that going. But credible information, let them give it.
It was this president who directed the Department of Justice and the Attorney General to do an exhaustive review of all files related to Jeffrey Epstein, which they did. The Democrats had control of this building, the White House, for 4 years, and they didn't do a dang thing.
So breaking tonight, President Trump ordered Attorney General Pam Bondi to release the grand jury testimony related to Jeffrey Epstein.
Well, we'll be looking at what that means with a former New York prosecutor a little later in the program. But first, let's take a closer look at that bombshell statement from the Department of Justice and the FBI. And they say they conducted an exhaustive review of all the evidence they had on Epstein, including hard drives and documents. They also say they allowed lawyers and civil liberties experts to be part of that review. And they insist that most of the material is sealed by a court order to protect Epstein's victims. And the FBI concludes that Epstein harmed 1,000 people. However, they say there was no evidence of additional third parties doing anything illegal, nor was there evidence of a so-called client list or people he was blackmailing. In the same memo, they provide a link to this video outside Epstein's prison cell and conclude that since no one entered his cell on the night he died, he must have killed himself. But commentators notice something rather suspicious about this tape.
So watch the clock. Right. Is every minute accounted for?
Wow, would you look at that? We just lost a whole minute.
It's hard to imagine that missing minute is not starting to look a lot more intentional than it did a couple of days ago.
Well, they're skeptical, but the U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi says she knows why there's a gap in the tape.
There was a minute that was off the counter, and what we learned from Bureau of Prisons was every night, they redo that video. It's old, from like 1999, so every night the video is reset, and every night should have the same minute missing, so we're looking for that video to release that as well, showing that a minute is missing every night. And that's it on Epstein.
Well, it's details like that that make people rather suspicious, and the claim that there's no client list. After all, Jeffrey Epstein was a billionaire, and he and Ghislaine Maxwell socialized with pretty much everyone back in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. He was convicted of procuring a child for prostitution in 2008. A year later, he was questioned by a lawyer acting for several women in a civil lawsuit.
Yes.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Could you please give us your name? Jeffrey Epstein.
Trump and Epstein's friendship is believed to have ended years before his conviction.
I had a falling out with him a long time ago. I don't think I've spoken to him for 15 years. I wasn't a fan.
However, others like Prince Andrew and Bill Gates were seen with Epstein after he was convicted.
It was the wrong decision to go and see him in 2010.
I regret doing that.
Epstein was arrested again in 2019 on sex trafficking charges and supposedly killed himself in his cell 2 months later while awaiting trial.
Breaking news right now. Disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein has taken his own life while he was behind bars here in New York City.
Ghislaine Maxwell, seen here at Bill Clinton's daughter's wedding, again after Epstein was convicted, was herself convicted of sex trafficking in 2021 and sentenced to 20 years in prison. She gave a rare interview from behind bars to Talk TV.
There's no seasoning allowed, there's no salt or pepper or anything. So it's beyond tasteless.
And now Pam Bondi's people and separately Congress want to talk with her. Here's law professor Alan Dershowitz, who acted for Epstein during his 2008 trial.
She knows everything. She is the Rosetta Stone. She knows everything. She arranged every single trip with everybody. She knows everything. And if she were just given use immunity, she could be compelled to testify. I'm told that she actually would be willing to testify.
Well, let's hear from our guest now, and we have two former FBI agents. Vic Hartman believes there's no Epstein cover-up, while Jonathan Gilliam is rather more skeptical. And for all the legal stuff, we have the former New York prosecutor, Vinoo Varghese. Welcome to the program, everyone. Jonathan, if I may start with you, do you trust the FBI to be honest and open with the public when it comes to the Epstein files?
Well, I trust the leadership of the FBI more now than before, that's for sure. But there are still people within the Bureau, because they just have not been fired. The Bureau hasn't really been cleaned out. So there's still people in there, most likely, that I would not trust. And I think the same thing goes with the DOJ. But when it comes to this particular issue, I think it's going to come down to what type of event or what type of thing was Epstein working? Was it an intel operation? Was it a criminal enterprise? Or was it like Diddy, just a lifestyle? And I think that's going to determine really if there is a list, if there's information that is actually usable to find out and prosecute some of these people. I think that's what it's going to come down to.
The Department of Justice and the FBI have said very clearly, we reviewed all the evidence, there is no list. Now, that is all the evidence they have. You seem to be alluding to the fact that if it was an intel operation he was working for, that evidence may have been tampered with, may have been destroyed. What are the chances that could have happened?
Well, if it is an intel operation, then I think that would be very likely, because he wasn't just charged with crime once. He was arrested twice. He was arrested in 2005, I believe it was, as well, and that went away. So when I see these types of, not just once but twice, I have to stop and ask what exactly is going on here. And if it was just a criminal case, and this individual was either had a lifestyle or was running a criminal enterprise trying to blackmail and jam people up, I think that in both cases we would have seen more.
Vic, I'm quite sure that you believe the Department of Justice and the FBI's official explanation, which there is no client list, and he did kill himself. And you believe that because lots of people have seen this evidence behind the scenes, and if they knew anything, they would surely leak it. Okay, but what about Jonathan's point that if Jeffrey Epstein was working for an intelligence agency, the evidence that would have presented a client list would have been destroyed?
Let's deal in a fact-based world. So let's just deal with the facts. Epstein was dealing with a sex pyramid, and he abused over 1,000 girls. Every time he met a girl, they would go out and recruit more, and he was paying them with cash. It's not an organization. It's not an intel organization. It's well known. It's well investigated. There's been 3 prosecutions and dozens of civil lawsuits. We know the facts. He was a pedophile and a sex abuser of over 1,000 women. When you have these prosecutions, you have law enforcement officers, FBI agents, analysts, prosecutors. The number of people who have been exposed to this material is easily 50 to 100 people, and it's probably double that. There's no law enforcement officer that I have ever met that would allow or know that we have a high-level politician or other high-profile person who's engaging in with pedophiles and sex with minors, and it's going to cover that up for some political cover-up. It just isn't going to happen.
But what if the evidence? But Vic, what if the evidence isn't there for those eyeballs to see in the first place because it's been destroyed? Because he has links to Ghislaine Maxwell, who has links, obviously, to her father, Robert Maxwell, who has links to Israel, for example.
Well, let's see how we got the information. So during an investigation, there's emails that are subpoenas. There was videos around the house. They were obtained. So all this evidence was obtained by law enforcement, and they put eyeballs on it. If somebody then destroyed that, you would have a law enforcement officer that saw this incriminating information, and now it's been destroyed. They would cry foul and holler to the high heavens that there's been a destruction. This information has been seen, and it's not there. The unfortunate part is our director of the FBI and the assistant director have peddled these conspiracy theories on podcasts. Dan Bongino has profited wildly from this. They got appointed to those positions for promoting conspiracy theories. The problem is they're the proverbial dog that caught the car. They don't know what to do. They peddled these conspiracies, and now they're drowning in them.
That's a great metaphor, Vic. Let me go over to Vinoo. Now, Vinoo, I know that you've been friends with KASH Patel in the past. We'll come to that in just a second. But I wanted to pick up on what Vic said about the evidence. The evidence, people had eyeballs on it from the moment they raided Jeffrey Epstein's premises until now. It is safe, and it is unadulterated, and it hasn't been deleted or destroyed.
I wouldn't agree with that. Look, just because people have seen it doesn't mean that they're going to release it. It doesn't mean that they're going to talk about it, because most of this evidence that's in the case is under a protective order. It's not necessarily released. While there were civil cases that occurred, that didn't mean that all the criminal evidence came out as a result of these civil cases. So, I mean, you got to look at these things in their very own words of these people and the connections here. And you've got to wonder if, in the end, President Trump is covering, if this is a cover-up for him. I mean, look, that is not an unreasonable explanation. He told New York Magazine in a 2002 profile of Epstein that I've known Jeff for 15 years. Terrific guy. He's a lot of fun to be with. It is even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side. KASH Patel was on a Benny Johnson podcast, and he told in 2023 and told the audience that House Republicans aren't doing enough to get this list released. And just less than a month ago, the Attorney General of the United States, who I think should get the benefit of the doubt when she says something. Said the Epstein list is on her desk. So you've got 3 people talking about Epstein, at different times, obviously. Now, where's this list? How did it exist? And how was it on the Attorney General's desk less than a month ago?
Vinoo. She's subsequently explained what she meant by "it's on my desk." She says she meant the general Epstein files are on my desk. She didn't mean the actual list, which may or may not exist. So, hang on, with that point aside for one moment, you just said that the President of the United States is trying to conceal these files because it might implicate him. And he has said, no, that's not the reason why he's doing that. He's doing it because the files contain a lot of spurious allegations against people who may be good people. And those allegations will do harm, whether they're proven or not, in the court of public opinion.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah, I would.
All right.
I guess I would. I think that less so because, you don't know it. You don't want to affect people's lives if it's phony stuff in there because there's a lot of phony stuff with that whole world.
I'm not saying the president is on that list. All I'm saying is that this man has said different things. And, look, there's a certain point. These people are working under him. Attorney General Bondi, Director of FBI Director KASH Patel, they're obviously going to do what he wants to do. He's the head of the executive branch. Now, all this other stuff that's going on where Trump says he wants grand jury documents to be revealed, well, that's a problem because grand jury proceedings in the United States are basically hidden from the public forever. You know how federal grand juries work? These 2 fine colleagues that are on this panel today, one will say the other one told him something about what somebody else told him, and that's enough. So what that means is practically it's a lot of nothing that even if they were released wouldn't be much help. What should be released to this list, and in terms of protecting people, hey, if the list is there or there is evidence and it's, there, who's the FBI to say who's innocent and who's not, right? Clearly it's been out there that Bill Clinton has been to this island, right? Bill Gates, whoever else, Alan Dershowitz. So maybe these things will clear them. Who knows?
So that's interesting.
It's sad right now that this is being complete. This is a complete 180.
That's a really interesting point you raised there, Vinoo, which is even if you get the grand jury testimonies, they're going to be very, very limited in scope. I got that. Okay, now, Jonathan Gilliam, have you heard anything from these 2 men that you'd like to respond to? Because I know that you're quite a strong supporter of President Trump.
From an investigative standpoint, I agree that this may not be anything further than just a lifestyle for this dirtbag, Jeffrey Epstein. However, when I look at the fact that the FBI created false evidence and then used that to spy on Americans just 4 years ago, and when I look at the fact that Hunter Biden's laptop was never brought forward, and the same thing with Anthony Weiner's laptop, who law enforcement officers that I talked to that know people on there, secondhand information, said they were grotesquely sickened by what was on Anthony Weiner's laptop. Nothing ever came out about that. So there is possibilities that information is never brought forward because of connections. It's also possible that some of that intelligence or the evidence that they gathered was never put into evidence. That would keep it from going forward and being seen even by a grand jury. And how would that occur? Well, if it was an intelligence operations, we wouldn't know. We would never get the final answer on this information because it probably would have been scrubbed before investigators ever got there.
We know that Pam Bondi in the Department of Justice wants to speak to Ghislaine Maxwell, so does Congress. So if I can go to each of you in turn. Vinoo, I'll start with you. Used to be a prosecutor in New York. What kinds of questions would you ask her? What kinds of incentives would you give her to talk?
Listen, I imagine, and I don't know this for a fact, but I imagine at some point the prosecutors who were heading the case against her had reached out to her lawyers to ask them whether she would want to cooperate. Apparently that was in the news and she had said no. Well, now she's sitting for 20 years. There's something called Rule 15 cooperation, which can happen after a person has been sentenced. but there's, it's kind of strict time limits. You got to kind of get in there pretty quickly, within a year normally. But, the AG or Todd Blanche, Deputy Attorney General, can go talk to her if the lawyers allow her, but they'd have to have something concrete on the table, like a severe reduction in sentence or maybe release or so I think the questions you want to ask is, hey, what's going on? Tell me who else was involved. But I have a feeling that that's not going to happen. And certainly, unless if I were Ghislaine Maxwell's lawyer, I want something in writing that would guarantee that my client would get out if she spilled the beans on everyone.
Would you be concerned, if she was your client, that she might come to an untimely end if she looked like she was about to tell everything?
Absolutely. I mean, the nature of the circumstances behind Jeffrey Epstein's death are incredible. I mean, the fact that that this could happen, in a federal facility, that is scary. So there are enough people, I mean, that I've even talked to who had sort of inside knowledge who have said that there's no way that this guy hung himself.
What sorts of questions would you want to pose to Ghislaine Maxwell, and what sort of incentives would you give her?
Sure. No, it's a good question. She knows where the bones are buried. She is the most knowledgeable person who's alive that could shed information on this. She's, I think, 63 years old. She's facing 20 years in prison. She has every incentive not to talk unless she can get her sentence reduced. So that's going to be her incentive. That's the carrot. However, if she does talk, and I do think she's very knowledgeable, how credible would she be? So her credibility is going to be an issue. Unless she can point to an email, to a video, to a bank account, unless she has some tangible evidence to corroborate what she's going to say, I'm going to be a little hesitant to believe whatever she says, even though she's very knowledgeable.
Vic, I understand
the FBI doesn't care. Can I just jump in, Matt?
Yeah.
The FBI doesn't care, or the DOJ doesn't care about credibility. They will use anyone they can use when they want to build a case. I mean, I have seen some of the worst people that have ever walked this planet.
Oh, I get your point's well taken. I'm just saying.
So Ghislaine Maxwell is no different than anyone else.
Yeah, she would want her information, and then you try to corroborate it. I'm just, whatever she says, I don't know, it puts us in a lot better place unless she can be corroborated. I mean, if she says Donald Trump and Bill Clinton are involved in this, well, you're not going to be able to believe it unless you can corroborate something. So I just think it would be great if she would talk. There's going to be limited value to it unless you can validate it.
Can I just pose this sort of bit of information, and then we can talk about it? Prince Andrew was sued by Virginia Giuffre, who alleged that Epstein and Maxwell forced her to have sex with the prince when she was just 16. Andrew denied meeting her, or at least he couldn't recollect, but he still paid millions in an out-of-court settlement to a charity of her choice. And unfortunately, Virginia Giuffre killed herself in April this year, just aged 41. Now, there may not be a list, but is that not an example of Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein pimping out an underage person to someone of considerable power, influence, and money? I know he denies it, and the settlement isn't an admission of guilt, but perhaps you can come in there, Jonathan.
Well, it's not an admission of guilt, but I believe they had a picture of them together as well.
Which he says is fake.
Listen, this happens a lot where, people didn't actually commit a crime, but they will pay a settlement just to get it out of the news or to get it away from them. So that in and of itself is not enough in a court of law to convict somebody for something. But I think it adds credibility, the fact that he was there and that he has high-level access to other people. So it keeps that type of possibility in the realm. I will say this about Ghislaine Maxwell, though. If she did testify, and I agree with both your guests about whether she would be credible or not, what we see now more than anything is convictions in the court of public opinion. And if she was able to start having some type of a voice in the public, I think that would hold great weight and incredible weight, and could help or hurt President Trump tremendously, who, by the way, at this point seems to be the most I would say innocent person, where he's just doing his job, and this is now spun up into something mostly because of this court of public opinion. I think most people, however, are interested in facts. We want to know why. And but I'm afraid if it was an intel operation, we won't know that regardless of what she has to say.
Now, Vinoo, as I mentioned at the top of the program, you've been friends with FBI Director KASH Patel for some time. When you hear people on the panel and on the internet saying, you know, this is the man who blew it all up and now is staring in the camera, unblinking, terrified. He's completely changed his tune. He said that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. There is no client list. They don't trust him anymore. What would you say?
I know him. I believe him to be an honorable man. And so he's now got to deal with the fallout of this, you know, from what he was saying before and what he was saying now. I mean, this whole thing about cleaning and draining the swamp, you know, which Trump talked about in term 1, is now here in term 2. KASH Patel said he was going to clean out the FBI DOJ. It remains to be seen whether he does it. I hope he can. When he came in, I was hopeful.
Vinoo Varghese, Jonathan Gilliam, and Vic Hartman, thank you all very much. Much appreciated. And thank you at home and on your phones for watching. Until next week then, goodbye.